So the Seattle Seahawks, I think this is kind of interesting here with Seattle. Geno's turnaround has been one of the best in recent football memory to me. Think about his career. It was dead. And I live in Jersey, so Geno Smith was always in the news. Dead with the Jets. Giants did nothing. Then he goes over to the Chargers. Didn't play in Seattle. I completely forgot. He was with Seattle for 2 seasons before he got the opportunity to play. Explodes with a 30-touchdown, 4,300-yard campaign. Like, he's put up some serious numbers, and he's helped them a lot in the transition from Russell Wilson to remain competitive, right? And he's brought stability in a time where that offensive line has been horrible. If you look over the past 3 seasons, Geno's been sacked the second most of anyone in the league, 127 times behind Russell Wilson's 133. He's had to run for his life. It's been bad there. That's been a problem for a long time. It still is a problem. It needs to be fixed. So Geno's brought stability, and I think if you're a Seahawks fan, you have to be pretty grateful for what he's given you. It's been a great story. It's been really fun to watch, and it was cool to see it start with the win over Russell Wilson and the Broncos, if I'm remembering correctly. Just the way that whole story played out here. But at the same time, when I look at Geno's 3 seasons in Seattle, there's a very clear ceiling. There's a very clear ceiling with Geno's 3 seasons in Seattle. 9-8, 9-8, 10-7, right? That first 9-8 season, the 49ers were 13-4. Nothing you can do about that. Great team. Second 9-8 season, San Francisco's 12-5. Not too much you can do about that. They're just a great team that was better than you. But this year, I think, clearly showed it. San Fran has a down year. The Rams got hot at the end of the season, but there was an opening. You lost to them mid-season in a huge game that you hosted at home. And LA goes 10-7, takes the division from you on the tiebreaker. Now you could look at that and say, hey, like, we were tied for first place at the end of the season. And that's acceptable. But the other way that I look at it is there was a very clear opening here to take advantage of a San Francisco team that was crushed by injuries. They're not, in all likelihood, not going to get crushed the same way again next season. You still couldn't win the division. You still couldn't beat most playoff teams. I'm not necessarily saying this whole thing is Geno's fault. That's not the case at all. But it is very clear right now that they're a team that's either 1, going to barely miss the playoffs, or 2, get waxed in the wild card game. Like, that is just going to happen with Seattle. I feel very confident about that. I said that the entire season. Go back to week 1, go back to the preseason show that we did. See, we know exactly who Seattle is, and they lived exactly up to expectations. They are the threshold for who is and who is not a playoff team. Almost every single one of their wins and losses was separated by who is and who is not a playoff team. Who did they beat? They beat the Bears, no playoffs. The Cardinals, no playoffs. The Jets, the Niners post-injuries. The Falcons, the Dolphins, the Patriots, and the Broncos. They beat 1 playoff team in Denver, okay? Who'd they lose to? The Vikings, the Packers, the Rams, the Bills, the 49ers pre-injury, the Lions, and the Giants. There's one team on both sides of these equations that did not live up to the expectation. Losing to the Giants and beating the Broncos. Other than that, the 49ers were the perfect threshold for who should and who should not be a playoff team. And that's where it comes down to it. You have a tough choice here with Geno, where the best decision to remain competitive next year is to keep him. But you don't play in this league. You don't watch, if you're a fan, to just be competitive, right? I hate when people talk about that. I've seen people say that owners care about just getting to the playoffs and having it be a successful season. That's not a successful season, just getting to the playoffs. It's a successful season when you're going in with no expectations. You're supposed to be really bad, and out of nowhere, you have a playoff year. Or if you're ravaged by injuries and you get to the playoffs unexpectedly, that's when you could reflect back and say, okay, like, that was successful. That was good. But now we need to take it to another level, right? The goal is to win Super Bowls. And if you're not consistently making efforts to get to that level, then you're doing your fans a disservice, you're doing the team a disservice, you're doing the sport a disservice. And Seattle's in this spot now where it was cute the first were 9-8, went to the playoffs, got waxed by San Francisco. No one expected them to do anything that year. No one expected Geno to be this crazy comeback story, but they did it. And I think that's a big win for Seattle. But 2 years later, the expectation needs to change. Who wants to just sit there and watch over and over and over again this same exact scenario play out? It's like going to the gym and never increasing your weights at all. You're not going to get that much stronger if you stay on the same weights forever. You'll be strong. You can keep lifting, but you're never going to take it to that next level. And that's where Seattle's at right now to me. There's nothing going on there. It's a very boring team, even though any week they could beat you. You go to Seattle, that's a tough game, right? Geno's your best option to get into the playoffs again next season. But next year's the last deal of his contract, and then he goes into free agency. So if he wants to come back and be the bridge quarterback for a year, fine, I'd take that. Like, I think he'd be a great bridge quarterback. He's a great leader, great story. If you can have a younger quarterback learn under him for a year and then he'll gracefully walk out and find his next team, yeah, I'd take that. But my guess is Geno wants to have a longer deal, or at least, 3-year contract signed this offseason. He's 34 years old, probably the last time he's going to get a longer deal. And again, not longer, but a longer than 1-year deal. And he probably wants to be competitive still and have a spot where he's the guy. I don't know how many teams are going to do that. Like a team like Vegas, maybe. So a team that's trying to get back to competitiveness will take Geno. The Seahawks are there, and they haven't been able to do anything else. So my thought is, it can't be Seattle to be the team that gives him this extension, right? $30.7 million over the cap. Cutting Geno saves you $31 million, $13.5 million in dead cap space. This is the time if you're Seattle to move on. Okay? You start over now. Look for your quarterback of the future. The timelines match up well. Mike McDonald's going into year 2. You saw dramatic improvements in the defense in his first year. They went from 25th in points allowed the past 2 years to 11th, 26th and 30th the past 2 years in yards allowed per game to 14th this season. Devin Witherspoon's a beast. Ernest Jones, great trade. He's a beast. He's young. Jackson Smith and Jigba, another young stud. Find your quarterback right now, and these timelines can match up well. Where in a couple seasons, you could be really competitive. You're throwing darts at a dartboard. It's hard to land a quarterback, but that's what you have to do, right? I would say it's scary to go into the unknown, but I'd rather be walking blindly with the hope of finding greatness than to sit still and know my fate. And that's what you have with Geno. You know your fate if you go on with Geno Smith. 9-8 or 10-7, you're going to lose in the playoffs. Go try and find your quarterback of the future. Whether it's in the draft, I know you pick 18th this year, so a little too late to go and get one of the stud quarterbacks unless something happens. But throw your darts at the dartboard. I mean, Jack would sit here and say, "Go get Jackson Dart." But even if it blows up this season and you're horrible, next year draft your quarterback. Right? Go find your guy and start this process. It's time to blow it up. You've been the same team forever. And we're not in the business of just making the playoffs and getting routed. That can't be it. And every Seattle fan knows it. Even if you love Geno Smith, I loved Kirk Cousins, and I actually thought Kirk could get the Vikings to a Super Bowl potentially. But in the very, very back of my mind, I kind of knew. Same thing with Sam Darnold. I really liked Sam. He had a great season. Amazing story. But in the back of my mind, do I really think he's the guy? Probably not. And that's why if he moves on, I'll be sad. But I know that wasn't the story where we win a Super Bowl. And it's hard to say that about, you want to believe in people. I have no problem at all if Seahawk fans say, we believe in Geno Smith, we think he can do it. I get it. I don't this show to me is not about coming on and ripping people. That's something I hate about sports media, is how much of it is just people shitting on other people. And it's not fun. That's not what this should be about. I think Geno's had a really, if you look back on it, an unbelievable career story. And I hope he goes somewhere and wins. But I think his time in Seattle is just, I think it's been ran out. So Jaden Daniels and the Commanders, that's a team that knows we got our guy. It sometimes takes a while to find your guy. Here's the lights coming in. A couple minutes left here. Jaden Daniels and the Commanders, they're confident that they have their guy. And that's what you want if you're a Seattle fan. You want to be able to find your guy. And you'll know it. Commanders fans said week 1, they could tell.